All right, guys, how are you? It's Eytan from Modern Day Bukharian. Today we have here my brother, a very good friend, Dr. Daniel Shimonov. He is a physician of internal medicine and nephrology. He graduated Hunter College with a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and physics. He then did 1 year of RNA research before entering SUNY Upstate Medical University for his MD degree. And then NYU Winthrop University Hospital for Internal Medicine, and then New York Presbyterian Hospital, Weill Cornell Medicine, where he finished training in nephrology, hypertension, with focus on transplant and immunology. Oh God, man. It's a lot. He has taken care of many COVID-19 patients during the height of the pandemic in the spring, and today we'll be discussing the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you guys know, recently we've had the Pfizer and BioNtech vaccine that was approved by the FDA. And this is one topic that Daniel, actually let everyone know, why are you doing this? You know, why did you decide to reach out to me and, have this live where we discuss the vaccine and all? You know, why is this important to you, man?
First of all, thank you for having me and agreeing to doing this, and thank you to everybody who's here. First, I want to start by saying I have no relevant conflicts of interest. I don't have any stocks or any ties with Pfizer or anything like that, or any pharmaceutical industry. And I'm not here to give any medical advice on an individual level. I'm just going to try to present whatever information and facts that I've learned about the Pfizer vaccine and what I know in general about vaccines and this COVID-19 virus. In terms of your question, why am I doing this and so on? So, we know that the first wave of COVID, did a lot of damage to New York City and particularly our community, the Bahrain community. And there's a lot of information out there, and it's hard to know like who to trust, what to trust, like what information is fact, what information is misinformation. As we know, misinformation has been very prevalent. And, I thought it'd be helpful to our community to kind of dissect through all the commonly asked questions and go through that. And, I'm humbled to do it for our community. And, now we have a second wave that's coming, and it's essentially here. It looks like some cases are going up in some areas, and, and now we have this vaccine here. Now, what does this all mean, right? And, we know this virus has taken lives, has caused, comorbid conditions. A lot of people went unscathed. They got lucky, they got okay. A lot of them in my family as well. And, businesses locked down, so much stuff happened, and it's terrible. And hopefully, vaccination is a solution to this problem and not an additional problem to this, right? So that's one part of it. And, in terms of vaccines, I know there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy in our community particularly. And I want to try to pivot the conversation to say that, not to say that this vaccine or every vaccine is 100% safe and everybody should take it, and that they don't cause any problems. And I want to pivot it from this will cause, X problem or this problem, and there's no evidence for those things. And what I want to mention is these are the good things about it, and these are the things that we should be aware of, and these are the potential issues that may come up. Because there are legitimate things to be concerned about, and then there are illegitimate things to be concerned about. And then the other thing I want to focus on is there is no zero risk solution in this situation. We're in the middle of a pandemic. COVID-19 is bad. We know that. And we have to compare that risk with the risks of the vaccine. Okay. So any drug that we give to any patient has risks, and we'll go over that. So the emphasis on what we will be discussing is safety and efficacy. How good is the vaccine? And as of compared to what the COVID-19 pandemic is doing, as of December 19th in the United States, we have over 18 million cases and over 317,000 associated deaths. Okay.
And Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I feel like vaccines, I feel like vaccines throughout the history, that since we've had them, they've been pretty good. They've been pretty effective. I have before this year personally, I've never seen in our community more of like this anti-vaccine mentality, of like
Mhm.
thinking that vaccinations aren't safe. Like personally, I've seen everybody go and vaccinate their kids growing up. I've never saw anybody make a problem about it. And now I feel like all of a sudden with this
Mhm.
one, it became such a, oh my God, and in reality, there was always a time when this had to be experienced by some group of people or even us at some point, with other diseases and stuff that we went through to the past. And like you said, there's a lot of risks involved. So what are the risk factors in COVID-19 in terms of like hospitalization?
So before we get into, the vaccine itself, I think you're asking a good question in regards to what is COVID-19 really doing, right? So we know that age is a big factor. The older the person, the higher risk of them going to the hospital. We also know that race is somewhat of a factor. They've looked at this, and blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans have 3 to 4 times risk than whites. We got, people who have severe obesity is a big problem, 4 times risk. Kidney disease is a big risk, also 4 times risk. Diabetes, 3 times the risk. High blood pressure, 3 times the risk. Interestingly, asthma is only 1.4 times the risk. So that was
Interesting.
very interesting.
When you sent that, when I read it first, I was also like, really, asthma? So extremely.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and then the more conditions that the person has, the worse the outcome.
And what about the risk factors that lead like people to dying in the hospital?
So if someone got admitted to the hospital, and the question is, okay, so what are the chances that this person is going to die? So again, it has to do with age. So 85 and higher, there's, compared to people who are 18 to 39, they have an 11 times more risk of dying in the hospital. If they're between 75 and 84, the risk is about 7 times more. If they are between 65 and 74, the risk is 6 times more than if you're over 40. And then if you're over 50, between 50 to 69, 64, it's 3 times more. So 50 years plus, you're at least 3 times more likely to die if you end up in the hospital. And then males have a slight increased risk than females. And those who have comorbid conditions, they're also at higher risk.
So, Daniel, let's discuss mRNA. So, as many people know, I mean, like those especially, I know, I feel that many people understand that this vaccine was made differently. A lot of people have heard that it was made differently than our traditional vaccine, and that's what gets them really scared. And a lot of people heard about this mRNA, but many people wonder, what is it? So, Daniel, what is mRNA?
So, so we like to make things very complicated in medicine. That's how we keep our jobs. But I'll try to make things a little bit easier to understand. So mRNA is messenger RNA. RNA is basically a genetic code that gives us the instructions, gives the cell instructions of how to make the building blocks of everything, which are proteins. It's kind of like somebody's giving you instructions, a instruction manual how to build a house. The manual itself is DNA and RNA, and the house and the bricks itself are the proteins. Okay,
And
so basically, the mRNA is set of instructions to make a protein.
now, why did Pfizer specifically? And I know I think I heard Moderna did as well. Why did they specifically use the mRNA vaccine tech and not use the usual protein dead virus technology that people are used to hearing about or knowing?
So that was my initial question too when I looked into, when this whole thing started. I was like, mRNA vaccine, I've never heard of this. I know about dead virus vaccines, live virus vaccine, protein peptide vaccines, but mRNA was kind of like new to me. It made sense, right? Because mRNA when it goes into the cell makes protein, and I'll go into what that means. But the reason why they did that, evidently, mRNA technology is much easier to process and manufacture the vaccine. And when the FDA and other, drug administration authorities license or give any kind of authorization for use for drugs or vaccines, they have to say that they have to look at every single manufacturing process, and they have to say, how is everything done? Is everything done the right way? And it turns out with mRNA, there's only one process. It's a very simple process, and it's very fast. So that's one reason why they did it, because they needed to make the vaccine very quickly, and so they had the technology for it.
So what is that? What is that process? How is the mRNA vaccine different from the regular, from any different form of the coronavirus?
So there's a difference between mRNA vaccine and the coronavirus, which has mRNA in it, okay, which has RNA in it. So the virus itself is not just the virus, and the virus itself is a long strand of mRNA, okay, and it encodes for more than 20 proteins, about 25 proteins, okay, and one of those proteins is called the spike protein, okay. And the whole virus is surrounded by a capsule, okay, and it has those proteins around it. And you can think of it like think of the virus as like a fully loaded car. It has seats in there, it has mirrors, wheels, etc. And think of the RNA vaccine itself as just like the wheel, okay? It's literally just a piece of the car, okay? And what the scientists do is they take that piece and they just surround it with the capsule. In Pfizer's case, it was a nanotech lipid layer, which is like a fat bubble, to just protect the wheel, to protect the RNA, so that when it goes into somebody's body, it doesn't get degraded. And I'll get into what that means. But does that answer the question of what the difference is between vaccine and the virus?
Yeah, and no, that answers the question perfectly, I think. Because like how one question we're getting here, and I think this is a very important question. That's kind of why I'm going to cut you off. And I think it has to do with what you're about to get into. So you were about to get into how does the mRNA vaccine work? What happens when it is in our cells, right? And we also got the question at the same time, can the mRNA change directly or indirectly the DNA? I understand that it's not getting into the cell nucleus, but does that really mean that it cannot affect the DNA structure? So please talk about how it works. And then also while you're talking about how it works, please be sure to mention, does it affect us? Because many people think they hear mRNA, it's such a close term to DNA. They think DNA, they think something with the body. They think that there's like some mutation that's associated with getting this vaccination. So please break it down for us.
So that's actually a very good question. So there are viruses, there are whole viruses that are RNA and that are called retroviruses, and they go into our DNA, like HIV, and they go there. This is where this concern came from, right? So HIV has an RNA with a protein called reverse transcriptase that allows it to go into the DNA. This is where this whole concern came from. The difference between a whole virus that has all these proteins and RNA and all these other proteins that allows it to go into the DNA is that this vaccine is just literally the RNA. And it's only a segment of the RNA that codes for the spike protein, okay? So it doesn't have that reverse transcriptase enzyme, that protein that allows it to go into the DNA. And our bodies, we don't have reverse transcriptase. It's something that we do not have. Yep. So once the mRNA goes into our cells, it makes the spike protein and then it dies off, okay? So let me explain this a little bit more clearly. So the vaccine is not a virus. It's not a virus. It's not a dead virus. It's literally a tiny segment of the mRNA of the virus itself. It's just a tiny segment that only codes for the spike protein. Remember, the whole vaccine, the whole virus doesn't just code for the spike protein. It codes for 25 proteins, right? So what these scientists did, they isolated just that segment that codes for the spike protein. So think of it like this.
It's like having a bridge, an entire bridge, and basically the scientists said, let me take this one specific crown part, whatever, screw, bolt, out of the bridge, and that's what we're going to put inside the vaccine.
Exactly. So let me give an analogy of how of why mRNA from the vaccine will not enter into our genetic code. Okay, I'll explain it in an analogy. So think of Hashem, God, talking to an angel, and he tells the angel, I need you to give a specific instruction to the people. And you have to tell them you have to keep Shabbat. Okay, that's the only message that I want them to keep. Okay, so the angel needs to come down to earth. for the angel to come down to earth, he needs to be in a protected layer, because let's say in this analogy that he needs to be in the protected layer, otherwise he'll just die, right?
Mhm.
So and so he goes into this bubble down to earth. He finds the people that he needs to talk to, and he gives them that message. The message is everyone needs to keep Shabbat. Once he gives that message, the bubble is gone, and then he goes back to heaven. Okay, he doesn't do anything else. So the RNA doesn't go into the nucleus. Once the message is given, the message is spike protein. Go make spike protein. Okay, that's analogous to keeping Shabbat. So that's the same thing that's happening here. Okay, and the reason why the RNA needs to be in a protected layer, like why do we need this nanoparticle protective layer, this lipid layer? Like, why is that even important? So they did studies in the 90s, way back in the 90s, actually, where this lady in UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, was trying to do RNA technology to solve various diseases, and like year after year after year, she wasn't able to do it. She wasn't able to succeed. She was very confident that it would work because in her experiments they worked, but it never panned out. And then a decade later, she partnered up with other scientists, and they realized the reason why it's not working is because RNA is very, very sensitive, and it dies off very quickly. It degrades very quickly. It's very, very unstable. So what they realized is we need to put a protective layer on it. Okay, we need to protect the angel with the bubble. Okay, and that bubble, BioNTech was one of the companies in Germany where they came up with this. They said we need to put it into this so that it once it's in somebody's blood, it is protected. And then that lipid layer, once it comes in contact with cells, the lipid layer goes away. The RNA piece goes into the cell. It finds the place in the cytoplasm where it can make the protein. It makes the spike protein. And in hours to several days, the RNA goes away and doesn't exist anymore. The only thing you're left with is a spike protein. Once the spike protein is there, it goes outside of the cell and it activates the immune system. What happens after it activates the immune system? So the immune system then looks at the spike protein and it says, wait, you don't look familiar to me. Okay, you're not part of me. You're coming from the outside, and I need to react in a certain way where you get immunity. Okay, so and what is immunity? Immunity is basically cells that are activated called B cells and T cells that react in a certain way so that if it ever sees the spike protein again, in this case COVID-19, it will have the immune cells ready to fight the virus. And that's what vaccination really is about. It stimulates the immune system in such a way so that you have enough cells to fight the virus.
Basically giving us the ability to basically like take care of it before it comes our way. We have a certain recognition to it because we have the vaccine. Now that it's coming our way, now that we come around it, our body already knows what to expect and our body knows what to attack and do.
Exactly.
And why specifically the spike protein though? Why was that the protein that they thought was best instead of the other 25 proteins that we said that is inside the coronavirus?
So that's a great question. Like, why didn't they choose like something else, like the N protein? So the reason why they chose it was because they found that that particular one can not only stimulate the B cells, but can also stimulate T cell response. And that's very important. B cells make antibodies, right? Otherwise known as immunoglobulins. So antibodies are basically proteins that attach to the spike protein, and then they basically neutralize it. They basically don't let it attack our cells. And then T cells, they directly kill any cells that are already infected with the virus so that it doesn't spread to other cells. So the fact that the spike protein can activate both B and T cells is very helpful in preventing the disease from becoming really bad.
Maybe you can answer it. I was just about to answer. But where does T cell store their knowledge and how? Doesn't it involve DNA?
Say that again, sorry.
Michael Malai was asking, where does the T cell store this knowledge and how doesn't it involve the DNA?
Where does the T cell store this knowledge? Okay, so
How and does it involve DNA?
so what happens is once you stimulate the immune system, okay, so I don't want to make it too complicated, but so so basically when the spike protein is, so when the mRNA comes into the cell, makes a spike protein, the spike protein comes out of the cell, then the immune system that is surveilling the body catches that spike protein and it presents it to the T cells. Okay, those cells that present it to the T cells are called antigen presenting cells. When they present it to the T cells start learning about this new substance, the spike protein, and then it starts making more of those cells. Okay, and then basically what it does is it makes more of those cells, and they're called memory cells. Okay, so those memory cells are stored in case another type of spike protein comes about in the future. So that's how it's stored. Okay.
And now,
I hope that answers your question.
No, I mean, let me see what he wrote over here. Oh, Aviva, I think he's going to answer your question coming up. I don't think it's well determined yet, but I think it's going to be determined. But I think he talks about it later on, just regarding your question. So just so we can get straight to the juice of everything. Now, tell us about the Pfizer and BioNtech vaccine. We know how it works. So we know everything. So what's the main, I guess we're going to focus on the discussion of the phase 3 trial, correct?
Yeah. So as you guys know, when they do drug trials, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And phase 1 trials are essentially to just see what dose of something they can do to make sure that everything is safe. Okay, so and they usually have low numbers of people. And then the phase 3 trial is really the meat of really the study. Okay, so phase 3 is just fancy way of saying let's have a lot of people in the trial, as many as possible, to make sure that everything is safe and it works, so that the virus works. Okay. I'll just break down the small details real quick, and then you can get into like the results. Okay. So the study, like as they said, they put in 40,000 people. They split them into 2 groups. We had a placebo group. If anyone who doesn't know, placebo is like the saline injection. It means a group that we use kind of as a control, as to compare, what one group receives the vaccine, one doesn't, and how does the one that receives it compare to the placebo or the one that didn't receive it. So that's how it's done. So they had about 40,000 people. What was I reading? Okay. And then they gave 2 doses of the vaccination 21 days apart, right? Yeah. So
yes, perfect. So what were the results? So let's say they gave these vaccinations. We had 40,000 people. What were the results? What did they see right away?
So they don't, so things aren't seen right away because
not right away. I'm sorry. What did you see from these results? What did you?
Yeah. So as you said, so there are 2 doses of the vaccine, and they're 21 days apart. So after the first dose, they actually saw some efficacy. Okay, and I'll get into this a little bit later when we get to the efficacy portion of the discussion. But they basically saw that after the second dose, after 7 days, that in the vaccine group, there was 0.04% who got confirmed positive COVID. So that was 8 people. And then in the placebo group, there were 162 people that were positive. So that's 0.9%. So around 1% versus 0.05% essentially. Okay. So that's a big difference. Okay. So that's where they got that number of 90 to 97% efficacy. The 95% number, that's where they got it from. So this is where I dug a little deeper. Okay. So this is where, so there was like a 53-page document, and there was like a 90-page document. In the 53-page document, and everything is in the references that he posted on page 42 or something. So I noticed that the confirmed positivities were only for 36,000 candidates. There were about 3,400 people in the trial that did not get the testing, and there were a decent amount of people who were quote unquote suspected COVID. So to me, and I spoke to some of my colleagues about this, and to me, they found this to be a limitation to the study. Okay, that not every single person in the study was tested. Now, having said that, there was still 36,000 people that we had very, very good data on. Okay, that's not a small amount of people. It's very hard to get this many people in a trial this quickly. Okay, and the 94% efficacy is was seen in those 36,000 people. And I also looked into this a little bit more closer. It turns out the 3,400 people that were there that didn't get the testing, they had symptoms within 7 days of getting the vaccine. So we know that if someone gets the vaccine, they may get like they may get a little soreness, they may feel fatigue, they may get a little fever. So it's plausible to say they didn't report anything because they thought it was just because of the vaccine. Mm-hmm. But when I read that, I was like, well, they should have reported it anyway, because it's they should not have just let that out. But I'm still I'm still happy with the 36,000 people that did report it. And then the last thing I'll say is that there was 2 months of safety and efficacy data. They couldn't do more because it's literally within a year of the whole pandemic. So 2 months is what the FDA wanted. And I think I'll try to talk about that a little bit later. And then in terms of severe disease, right? Like, why do we care about the vaccine, right? Like, because COVID can be really bad for certain populations, mm-hmm. and we want to prevent severe people, and we want people to not die, right? So there were 10 people that had severe COVID. There were nine of those were in placebo, and one of them was in the vaccine arm. So basically, this tells us that a lot of people who were in the placebo arm got severe disease, and only one person got it in the vaccine arm. And then I looked into this further, like why did this one person in the vaccine, like why did anyone get severe disease, right? Mm-hmm. Like why, like it should not happen if the vaccine is really good. So it turns out that one vaccine person that got severe disease was he got the COVID-19 only after the first dose. So when I saw that, I said, this is why it's important that they give 2 doses of the vaccine, so that you get a much more robust, better response for your immune system if you get the 2 doses. Okay, so I suspect that if this person didn't contract COVID in between that 21-day period, and he caught COVID after the second dose, he probably would not have had severe disease. That's my suspicion.
Mm-hmm. And now I feel like we spoke a huge chunk about mRNA, but I feel like what we should really already be getting into is that everyone understands how fast this all has happened. In the beginning of the year when Trump discussed Operation Warp Speed and spoke about how we will have a vaccine within a year, everybody was skeptical. Everybody thought there would be no way. And for the record, for all those right-leaning, people who are more right-leaning, like myself as well, guys. Warp Speed, all this, the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna vaccine, that was all Trump. It's not Bill Gates. It's not anybody. It's Trump. This was his plan. This was exactly what he was trying to set up in the beginning when the whole pandemic started. This was the goal. This was what Warp Speed is, to get a vaccine out to the people. But yeah, so I said why. So just to break it down, Daniel, why was it rushed? Why so fast? Other than understanding Warp Speed in general, why would the pharmaceutical companies feel so comfortable to get this done?
So this was a really, really good question, right? I even asked this myself, like, how is it possible that they granted EUA in December when this pandemic just started in, December, January, who knows when? So this has to do, so I get this question. I get this question a lot, and I've even asked it myself, okay? I'll give you my short answer. The short answer is they did not rush the safety and efficacy data itself, okay? And I'll tell you why, okay? Please don't leave, okay? I'm going to explain why.
No, go for it.
So I really want people to hear this and try to understand this. Why this became successful. So number one, we talked about that mRNA technology is faster to easier to use, and it's faster to manufacture, and it's faster to accept by agencies like the FDA because of how quickly they're able to do it. So that's one factor, okay? Number two, you mentioned Operation Warp Speed, okay? And not just Operation Warp Speed, but also private companies who also had an invested interest in having a vaccine, right? Because they're getting shut down and all this, right? They don't want that to happen. So a lot of businesses and other pharmaceutical companies, they invested a lot of money into this vaccine because they want to get this vaccine out so they can all go back to normal lives. So all that money, so usually when they do trials, it takes years to get things through. Like a pharmaceutical company is not going to go from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 3 in a matter of a year. Why was it able to happen here? Because when they go from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 3, they need to invest a lot of money to do that, right? To make the drug or the whatever product they're making, it costs a lot of money to do that. The government told them, listen, I don't care if this works. Here's $1 billion. Go do it. I don't don't worry. You will get the money whether this works or not. So the company said, okay, screw waiting years until we get money to do this. So so let's just risk it and move on to phase 2 and phase 3. So they didn't have to spend money. So that was a big reason why they were able to do it really quickly.
I hear they dish out a lot just to get these trials done. They have to dish out a lot of money just to get it done.
Absolutely. So financially, this really helped get this faster. Okay. The other thing is when you have a disease that happens like once a year, like let's say whatever, some rare disease, okay, some Gaucher's disease, okay, that nobody probably heard of. So like if you try to do a drug for Gaucher's disease, it's going to take you decades to come up with the drug. Why? Because there's no people who have the disease. But if you have a disease where thousands and millions of people are getting sick with this virus, right? That it's easy to get results very quickly. Once you get the virus, you get sick within a week, right? Within a week you get sick. So you have a quick result of what happens. So that's very important. So when you have a large sample size of people who are sick, you can get results very quickly. So mRNA technology being quick is one reason. Having financial security for the companies by the governments is a second reason. And having increased number of cases of the disease that you're looking at is the third reason. So those are the three major reasons why they were able to do this really quickly. Now here's something very interesting that I found. Okay. So I looked into this and it looks like the CEO of Pfizer, this freaking scumbag, he was trying to get this vaccine, this Pfizer vaccine out by October. He was like, we need to get this out quick. He was getting his employees to try to work really hard, and they worked really hard to get this out by October. Then FDA stepped in and they said, no, you're not going to rush people, and we're not going to give you any authorization until we have minimum 2 months of data. Okay, so Pfizer said, okay, fine, we're not going to do it by October. And I have the article, by the way, in the references for where I saw this.
All the references are on the.
Yeah. Okay. So FDA said, no, you're not going to do that. So they waited 2 months, and you have to finish a phase 3 trial before we do anything. Okay. Before we give you any authorizations, you need to do a phase 3 trial. So this is where the FDA did some good. Okay. They really are looking out for us in this fashion by saying, hey, you have to finish a phase 3 trial. And I was really happy when I saw that. I think that was, and then, so then the question comes, like, why did the FDA say 2 months, right? Why not 3 months? Why not 1 month? Why not, et cetera? So they did a literature review of prior vaccines and when did side effects happen in other vaccines. And they found that most of side effects happen within 6 weeks. So they said, so they wanted an extra 2 weeks. So they said, you need 2 months, so 8 weeks to get that. Now, here's the thing. Ideally, and I see the question popping up, ideally, you would like to wait a year. You would like to wait as long as possible before something is authorized, right? Like every person in their right mind would love to have the safest drug possible, right? But the FDA, and rightfully so, they know, listen, we got 3,000 people dying every day from this virus, right? We can't let that happen. So we need to come to a compromise. And the compromise they reached was 2 months.
And the 2 months specifically, I believe it's not for their full approval, correct? It's for something called an EUA. You want to speak more on what an EUA is?
Yeah. So a lot of people hear this thing called EUA, like what emergency authorization. What does that mean?
When I heard it, I heard something from Europe, like EU.
European Union Association or something. So EUA stands for emergency use authorization. So sometimes, and this is relatively rare, the FDA says that because the situation is so dire, because it's so bad, we need to let this drug go under emergency use for emergencies. We cannot wait for 6 months or a 1 year long-term data to allow this drug to be used. Okay.
And what's the difference between EUA and full approval? So how long does full approval take? So EUA, like you said, they needed the 2 months, the 6 to 8 weeks. How long does full approval take?
So for this particular vaccine, they said EUA needs to be at least 2 months, and for full approval. But so by the way, what they did now is called EUA. This is not full approval. What they just allowed now.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to just like put more emphasis on that so people understand.
And full approval will happen. They according to the FDA, they want at least 6 months of safety and efficacy data. So they want at least 6 months of good safety and at least 50% efficacy. Okay. Right now they got 90% efficacy, 95% efficacy, but there's a chance that in 6 months the efficacy could wane to 40%. We have no idea. And this is something they brought up, the FDA panel brought up to Pfizer in the meeting. They said, well, what happens if, in 4 or 5 months, the efficacy goes to 30% or something, right? Then what's the FDA going to do? The FDA cannot approve that drug, right, for one-time use. They have to either come up with a better drug, or they may, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but they may say, you have to do the vaccine at least once a year or something. I have no idea. But the FDA is one of the stringest, it's one of the most strictest authorization agencies in the world. Like you saw Britain and Canada approved the drugs for EUA. They approved it before we did.
Yeah, they didn't have.
FDA is very, very strict. Like I worked with some of my colleagues who work like in the advisory board for like certain drugs. It's a freaking pain in the ass to approve anything with the FDA. It's near impossible.
I'm going to ask you more about the FDA, but before we get into the FDA, is it the vaccine getting mandated? Is it vaccine? Is it mandated? Why or why not? Is it going to be mandated? Have people not at your hospital gotten it? I know some of my friends at the hospitals already have started getting it, all taking pictures, all posting, because it's for some, and even for myself, I agree. I think it's a very big moment for us, We're living through history, and right now it's not really processing for many people, but I think later on they're going to come to see that this was the year that a lot has happened. A lot. And so life as we know it has definitely changed. So tell me more. Is it going to be mandated?
So I think that's an excellent question. And by the way, people, I see that you're posting questions. I appreciate them. I will try to get to as many questions as I can. Okay. I'm available as long as possible. But to answer your question, so they have not mandated the vaccine. So FDA, CDC, federal government, state government, local government, hospitals, schools, nobody has mandated this vaccine, Pfizer or Moderna. Okay, that's number one. Why have they not mandated it? Number one, because we just don't even have enough supply. Okay, even if they said everyone must get the vaccine, we only have like 5,000 doses for like 18 hospitals or something like that. Like we don't even have enough, right? There are rich people in California literally bribing hospitals, $50,000 charities to try to get this vaccine. Like you guys should look up the stories.
Yeah, I heard of that as well.
There are literally like people who have concierge doctors. They're like trying to get the vaccine, like they're bribing people to get it. So There is no way that something this scarce they're going to mandate. That's number one. Number two, it would be like legally irresponsible for them to mandate something that is EU under emergency use authorization and that is not full approval authorization. Like anyone can easily go and just do legal action against an EUA drug. Like if something is emergency use authorization, like an agency, school or hospital or anyone, they cannot mandate something like this.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Now, having said that, you know, it still would be a good idea for somebody who's high risk to take this vaccine as soon as possible, because the risk of that person getting COVID and then, you know, having the complications, you know, lung fibrosis, kidney disease, strokes. I have a guy right now who had COVID in I think September, and he came into the hospital yesterday with a stroke. And I'm suspecting that it's because of his COVID-19 that he got it. Because we've been seeing this over and over again. People coming in with strokes like 2 months later with CT scans showing lung fibrosis. There's COVID-19 is not, you know, you can't just look at the 99.3% survival. You have to look at also the morbidity that it can cause.
It's
okay.
known that when it hits, it definitely hits hard. And I think I've seen a lot. I think I've heard a lot of, you know, because people hear high risk, they don't think of hospital workers right away when they think about high risk populations. They need to get it. They think about more the older people, you know, the comorbidities and all that. But our hospital workers are frontliners. They are what make our healthcare system. They are what keep us alive. That's why they're, you know, the whole EUA is going on to give them these vaccinations. I've heard so many stories. My friends who were working as interns during the pandemic of how a good amount of nurses or healthcare professionals got sick from the COVID. They had some type of comorbidity. They end up passing. And, you know, this is giving them the vaccine is their hope, their way of preventing, you know, people that are, this is their livelihood. This is their job. You know, this is what we do for a living. Yeah, part of us loves it. And then a part of us, you know, this is just what we need to do, you know? So,
well, one thing I will say,
a lot of people are very worried that healthcare workers are getting it. They're like, why are they getting it first? You know, what if something happens to them? You've seen the meme of like, oh, give it to the politicians first. We don't need them. And listen, heck, you know, it's funny and all that, but at the end of the day, we all know very well those politicians are not going in front of those to help them out.
I mean, so the data for safety. So for me, to be honest with everybody, the safety part is actually really good. So the safety component of the studies was not my concern. So the issue that I raised earlier, and I don't know if somebody, you know, joined the Zoom a little later, but one of the issues I had with this trial was not the safety component of it. The safety component was really, really good. The efficacy component of 95% that they're touting, I don't think it's actually going to be 95%. And I'll explain why I think that. So number one, study participants tend to be people who are more, you know, more likely to wear masks, more likely to distance. They're more likely to, you know, follow those guidelines. Number two, 3,400 people did not get tested when they had quote unquote suspected COVID. So for me, that puts a little, you know, dent on the efficacy effect. So, you know, if I'm going to make like an educated guess, I suspect it's going to be maybe 80% maybe efficacious. Which is still amazing. 80%, like I didn't expect, nobody expected 80% effectiveness. But like, you know, I'll take their word for 95%. So, you know, but I have slight doubts that it's 95%. I think it's a little bit lower than that. But the safety component of it for short term, for the 2 months, it looks pretty good. But I'll get to some of the things that we did see. So I'm not going to completely give them 100% benefit here. Okay. Michael, you're right. This is short term. This is one of the limitations of the study. It's 2 months data. You're absolutely right.
But like we said,
but you have to look at the short term safety data and compare that, or rather, you have to look at the theoretical long term risks of the vaccine with the risks of getting COVID. Okay, so even younger people who get COVID, yeah, even healthy young people can get bad disease. Okay, majority don't, but some people do end up in the hospital, and some people can get some side effects that they may not even know about. Okay, for example, that I mentioned, lung fibrosis, some kidney insufficiency, some kidney involvement. Some people have been shown to have some cardiac, heart involvement. Most people do fine. We know that, right? But there are cases where they don't. So you have to compare that risk with the risk of the vaccine. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Yeah. So what I was gonna mention, some people are having their doubts, but as we spoke, the FDA is extremely, extremely strict on everything. So what are the two main issues that you think the FDA is gonna really concentrate on in this vaccine?
So
Michael, what are
Michael,
the two main things they're gonna concentrate on, and let's talk about also how they're gonna break it down and how they're gonna concentrate on it.
okay, so that's a great question. So Michael, thank you for all your questions. I appreciate this. So the two main things the FDA is not done, okay? Just because they gave the EUA, their emergency use authorization, it does not mean they're done with looking into what happens with this drug. So during the 9-hour event, there were a lot of people there that asked the question, hey, Pfizer and hey, FDA, what are you guys going to be looking at 2 months, once this drug is out? How are you going to be monitoring for side effects? How are you going to be monitoring how effective it is? So the two main things that they're looking at is safety and efficacy, right? How effective is this vaccine? So we know within 2 months, it's 95% effective from the data that they provided. And how safe is it? We'll go into the safety profile a little bit later. So let's talk about efficacy first, okay? So once again, we mentioned FDA says we need a vaccine to be at least 50% effective, okay? If it's more than 50% effective, then you can get approval, assuming everything else as well, okay? Number two, what will FDA look now after the 2 month period, from 2 to 4 months? What are they going to be looking at from December to February? So they're going to be looking at severe disease, okay? How much severe disease is this vaccine preventing? So we know that in the early trial, it prevented a lot of severe disease, right? That's one of the reasons they let the vaccine go under emergency use, because they don't want people ending up in the hospital and dying, right? We know that this vaccine can do that, but can it continue to do that? Will the effectiveness persist? Okay, so that's one question they will still have to look at. Number two, what about non-severe disease? Okay, people who get really sick at home, of those of you who've had it, or of those of you who've had people who got sick with it, like they can get really sick with it. They may not need to go to the hospital, but it sucks. So can it prevent that? So we still need some data on that, okay? Number three, what if I get the vaccine and then, a month later I get infected? Will I transmit it to my kids? Will I transmit it to my grandfather? Will I transmit it to my coworker? Will I transmit it to my, the people who come to my work? So that question is very, very important. And the FDA committee wanted to know the answer to that question. And the Pfizer group, they answered, we are still looking at that data, and we will have that data in January of 2021. So that's very exciting. I'm really, looking forward to looking at that data to see if that's there. Now, what's very interesting is Moderna. I just learned this today. They have data that shows that their vaccine can also prevent people from getting asymptomatic infections. In other words, getting infected, but being asymptomatic. So that's been a big problem with this virus, right? People get the infection, they don't feel anything, and then they spread it to their loved ones. But this vaccine for Moderna seems to be preventing that. I haven't looked at that data yet, so yeah. we can talk about it in the future if we want to do this again.
But EUA, right? If I'm correct.
Moderna just got EUA, yes.
They did. We definitely should have one on their vaccine as well, because honestly, I've been thinking theirs would be better, but we'll see. Because I know they're using tech, so I don't know how I don't know the difference. So I guess that's what we're going to find out.
Mm-hmm. So I want to keep going with the question that you asked. So the other questions that the FDA discussions had was why can't we just give one dose? Why do we have to give 2 doses? I think somebody asked that question. So I answered it earlier, but basically they found at least 50% effectiveness after the first dose, but they found 95% effectiveness after the second dose. So Pfizer said we still recommend 2 doses, and FDA agreed with that. And then the other thing FDA asked and we'll be looking at is the duration of the protection. How long is the protection there? Is it 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 1 year, 5 years? Who knows? So that's something they will be looking at. The other thing the FDA will be looking at is how are vaccines compared to one another. So is Moderna better than Pfizer in 6 months? Is AstraZeneca better than Pfizer in 6 months, or whatever time frame? So that's another thing they will be looking at. I'll answer the question about the storage with the low temperature and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I just asked about the difference of Moderna and Pfizer, and personally,
Yeah.
I don't know the main difference. The only one that I've heard about is the temperature one that was just mentioned.
That's to be honest with you, that's really the major difference. That's the major difference. But I'll mention that in a minute. And then the last thing that the FDA will look at, I'm sure it's not limited to this as well, is viral evolution. In other words, can this virus mutate? And if this virus mutates, can the vaccine still be effective against this mutation? So as many of you have probably heard, there's a strain in Britain that looks like it's a mutated strain, and it's spreading very fast according to Britain. Mm-hmm. And it's concerning everybody, which, it should be concerning to everybody. But to be honest with you, we don't have all the details yet. And I wouldn't, no one's going to change what they do right now anyway, because it's in Britain. And, the common question is always asked is, will this vaccine protect against that strain? And they just started giving out the Pfizer vaccine in Britain. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those vaccinated get the new strain. So a lot of the scientists are saying that, it probably should not. They're very enthusiastic that this vaccine will be good against that virus. But, I'm not sold on that yet. I need to see data to make that decision. Okay. Yeah. I think we talked about the 2 shots with the 21%, 51%.
Yeah, efficacy stuff we went through. Let's talk about. I know we had a whole script, but I'm kind of skimming just because I want to get to the really juicy stuff that I know a lot of people have been asking about. So side effects, adverse effects.
Oh yeah, so we talk about efficacy.
Here's what are the good ones. I know that I'm just skipping to it because I feel like it's very important. Oh wait, but this is also important. Okay, so for side effects, because people have asked, what are the ingredients? Before we talk about side effects, adverse effects, what are the ingredients inside the vaccine? Specifically, what are the things that that they have inside it? And also, who should not take it because of allergies? So what's in it? Who should not take it because of allergies? And then we'll get into the adverse effects, the Bell's palsy that happened with a few cases, and we'll talk about that after, okay? So what are the
Yeah.
Go for it.
So great question. So the Pfizer vaccine is actually what was interesting about it, it doesn't really have much. It's the segment of the RNA that codes for the spike protein. And it's the nanoparticle lipid layer, which is which one of the main components of it, it's called polyethylene glycol. Some of you may know it as Miralax. That's basically a stool softener. Okay, so that's one of the components of it, and it's present in many drugs. So there's a lot of drugs that we give patients that have polyethylene glycol. Actually, what's interesting? One of my patients the other day that I saw on Friday, we give him injections of a drug that increases blood count, and that drug particularly has polyethylene glycol, and he's allergic to he was allergic to that drug that we gave him. This was months ago. Mm-hmm. And I told him on Friday that because you have an allergy to polyethylene glycol, I don't think that you should get the Pfizer vaccine. You should probably not get the Pfizer vaccine. You should probably get a different one. Mm-hmm. Maybe Moderna or whichever one doesn't have polyethylene glycol. Okay. So that's one of the components. Okay. The other things that's in there, so it's the RNA, the polyethylene glycol lipid layer, and some electrolytes, potassium, saline, basic stuff that we put in every medication. So, and then in terms of allergies and who should not take it, that this was like a big thing. So Pfizer was grilled about this by the FDA because the hearing happened after the two British people had the severe allergic reactions, and they wanted the FDA to put a provision in the document to say something about allergies, okay, and the CDC as well. So what they basically said is, so let me say what happened. So in Britain, there were two people who had a severe allergic reaction, and it turns out those two people have a history of severe allergies, and they walk with an EpiPen. And they had a severe reaction, but they did okay. They got the EpiPen that they needed, and they're fine now. But they cannot get this vaccine again, okay? Because anyone who has a severe allergic reaction to anything, we cannot give them that drug again.
That again, yeah.
Okay, so that's that. Now, the main thing that they're saying about this vaccine is if a patient has a history of an adverse reaction to any of the ingredients of the vaccine, particularly polyethylene glycol, they should not take the vaccine. Okay, so for example, that patient that I saw on Friday, I told him, listen, you shouldn't take the vaccine because you're allergic to polyethylene glycol. So if you if you're in the healthcare field or anything like that, make sure you tell them all your medical history. Make sure you tell them what you're allergic to, every single reaction that you get from an allergy, and ask your doctor if this medication is right for you. I sound like a drug commercial. But seriously, talk to your doctors about what you're allergic to and not, okay?
And okay.
In terms of animal trials, let me just quickly answer Mike's question.
That's
so from what I understand, they had to skip animal trials because they had to go quickly. And the only, from what I understand, animal trials are absolutely required for pregnancy, for pregnant women. So they cannot do any trials on pregnant women until they do animal pregnancy trials. Somebody's telling me that they did trials in mice. I'm not aware of animal trials, so I don't want to give wrong information. But to me, to be honest with you, they did a trial on 40,000 humans. So to me, that that trumps anything for me, to be honest. Yeah. So.
And out of those 40,000 humans, as we said, some adverse effects were experienced. So we had 4 people that developed Bell's palsy. Just give a quick summary. What's Bell's palsy? Because people think had Bell's palsy trouble,
So this was very interesting, and we did see a few patients, 3 patients in the Moderna trial and 4 patients in the Pfizer trial. So remember, there were 40,000 people in the Pfizer trial, and 20,000 got the placebo, 20,000 got the vaccine. Of the 20,000, 4 people, which is a very low number. Okay, it's not like half the people got Bell's palsy. 4 people got Bell's palsy. Okay, what is Bell's palsy? Bell's palsy is it's one of the nerves in the face that gets affected and it gets paralyzed. So you get like a droopy face. Half of the side of the face gets a little droopy. Most of the time, Bell's palsy is a reversible condition. Okay, most people, it eventually goes away. And sometimes it's treated with steroids. And when they get the steroids, sometimes the steroid, a lot of the times steroids help. So in this particular trial in Pfizer, 1 patient has a history of Bell's palsy, and then they got the Bell's palsy. 1 person's Bell's palsy went away very quickly, and the 2 other people, they're still following up to see what happened to them because the trial, the 2-month period ended, so they weren't able to release that data yet. So once that data comes out, we'll know what happens to the other 2 people. But nobody can say right now if the vaccine caused this or it did not cause it. Right now, you take the assumption that it did cause it, but the FDA and Pfizer, when they looked at that number, 4 people out of 20,000, it looks like it's the number of patients that got it is about the same as would happen if no one even got anything. Like the background amount of people that would normally get Bell's palsy. That's the amount that got it. But to be honest with you, you can't just say that right now that this was just an unrelated event. You have to assume that it may have been. So the FDA said we have to, we have to look at this very closely to make sure that this is not something that will keep happening.
Yeah, and so I really want to get into the juice of things. Just a couple of things that I know I've been hearing from people. So now be honest with us. Does the vaccine cause infertility?
So there's no data to show that it causes infertility.
Social media has it all over. Everyone's been saying that if I get this vaccine, I'm not gonna have kids, or like something bad's gonna happen to me, or blah blah blah. Like so.
Okay, so there was like some guy that sent some information about a protein that looked similar to the spike protein, and how because of that the placenta would get affected. But the amino acid sequence that is there it's similar, but it's not similar enough to cause any cross reactivity with the placenta. That's number one. Number two, there have been no cases in the trial that had any infertility. And in fact, there were actually about 20 to 30 people who got pregnant during the trial. So, to me, that tells me that it probably, did not have to do with the virus. The vaccine does not cause that. But on the other side of the coin, there were actually people, and there's data about this, that males may have effect of so let me rephrase this. There have been cases of people who are males who have had COVID-19 who have had issues with sperm production. So there's some data that COVID-19 can cause problems with sperm. So, to me, in this case, and it causes erectile dysfunction. Actually, the patient that I saw that came in with a stroke, he got erectile dysfunction, and it started 3 weeks ago. So that was another problem. So there have been cases of sperm dysfunction. There have been cases of erectile dysfunction, etc. So I think that the whole infertility thing, it's not. There's no proof of that, so I wouldn't, go by that.
So is it? How about
somebody said you trust Pfizer with your Viagra, you should trust them with the vaccine.
100%. We're gonna post that. We're gonna share. I was gonna share my screen and share with everybody later. Now, as far as like the 16, 17-year-olds, is it safe for the 16, 17-year-olds?
So some members of the committee were concerned that there were only 100. I think it was 120 or 150 people. 126 people. There were 126 people who were 16 and 17-year-olds. So 4 members of the committee, of the advisory committee, they did not want to approve emergency use because they didn't want to approve it for 16 and 17-year-olds. So, because of that, they're saying, we should not give the vaccine to those who are 16 to 17.
No, for sure. Now, okay. So as far as this vaccine, Daniel, what do we not know at this time? Like, what do we not know? And we have we have a pretty general idea of the short-term effects, especially since the FDA made Pfizer prolong the, made Pfizer wait 2 more extra months before they got the EUA and got a little bit more juice, a little bit more data. What do we not know now, though? And what are we going to be looking forward to finding out, discovering, and knowing later on? What is the things that we personally will be seeing?
So this is the kind of question that we really need to be looking at. So the whole infertility thing that's a theoretical thing, right? So there's no data to show that there's infertility with the vaccine. But these are the questions that we really need to know. So number one, how long so we know there is protection, right, from the virus with this vaccine, but we do not know how long we are going to be protected for. Okay, is it going to be 6 months, 12 months, etc.? Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So that's number one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the reasons why the FDA did not give full approval to the vaccine, because it only has 2 months of data. They don't have enough data to do a full approval.
They really say this is good enough. you
This
know.
is a good thing. So this is the good thing that the FDA did, because there were some people in Pfizer that said, "Hey, why can't we get full approval?" So they're like, "No, you can't get full approval right now. You don't. You got 2 months of data, but we'll give you emergency approval because we really need this vaccine right now."
And I think
Okay.
it really emphasizes how strict, FDA is trying to be with it. And again, how you mentioned, nobody's going to be mandated if there's not a
Right.
full
Right.
vaccine.
Right.
And we're not going to see
Right.
full approval until, I'm sorry, full approval until about March or April. So again, guys, don't sit there worried, panic, thinking like, oh, I have to get this vaccine tomorrow. They're going to make me. They're going to make me. Nobody's making you do anything right now, okay? Right now,
Right. Right.
literally just the scientists and the healthcare workers, first responders, people that are on the line to get the vaccine first, working hand in hand, to see the research, to see how it's working, to see if this is effective for everybody, And at the end of the day, the best thing about having, I believe, the fact that they're starting with healthcare workers also is that we're the most transparent as patients. We'll say exactly what we felt, how we felt it, what we feel. We're not going to hide anything about this vaccine, because in 2, 3, 4 months, when it does get fully approved, we want to make sure that everybody, takes it comfortably and sees the data and knows that, hey, there's a certain level of safety behind me doing this. Why not do it? Like we say, we always want the benefits to outweigh the risks, and as far as what you're getting into, as far as like what we have, I feel like the benefits are definitely doing that.
So then the second thing that they were going to be looking at is, the efficacy of this vaccine against transmission. So that's a very, very important thing that we don't know. And hopefully we'll know by January for the Pfizer vaccine. And Moderna, they're saying that we already have that data. So, but I want to look at it. So I'm really curious. So that's something that we need to look. So it's long-term side effects, it's long-term protection, and it's long-term and it's transmission to other people, even if you get the vaccine. So those are really, really important questions that we don't know answers to, that we need to do it. And then there are lots of other questions. Is it safe in kids? Is it safe in pregnancy? Is it safe in people who have a kidney transplant, a heart transplant? Is it safe in people who have HIV? So the thing with kids, some parents may want their kids vaccinated because they may not want their kid to get the multi-systemic inflammatory disease, like that Kawasaki disease. So most kids do fine, and most kids do totally fine, but some kids do get this multi-inflammatory disease, which can affect the heart, and that happens. I spoke to my friend who's a pediatrician. A very small number, very, very small number. The number, kids are mainly safe, but rare cases happen. So this is why we need immunity. If we have enough immunity, herd immunity in this community, our kids will be safe. Our grandparents are going to be safe, etc.
And just as a side note, for people that mentioned the kids, like, we're all for kids going to school. We're all for, kids being involved in those day-to-day activities. I'm for it 100%. You have to understand that when they restrict school, when they mention kids, they're not mentioning that the kids are going to get sick or anything like that. They're not thinking about the kids. They're thinking about what happens when the kids come home, what happens when the kids are in school. Not every kid keeps the mask on their face. Again, transmission rates have been debatable, right? Some people say there's not much transmission from children to adults. Some people say there is, so it's all about kind of
well, actually, Eytan, you make a really good point. So children can spread it to other people. And in fact, my brother, when he had COVID, he thinks he got it from his daughter, who's like 2 years old.
Yeah.
So
exactly. You see, and that's the big debate, because a lot of people are trying to say like, oh no, they're just kids, they can't pass it to us. That's not necessarily true. So again, we're all for school, we're all for everything. Why we need to kind of reach this immunity is because we want our kids to go to school. We want it to be kind of you don't want to think, okay, I went to school one day, or my kid went to school, and then Dedushka or Babushka got sick the next day. You know what I mean?
But again, I want to make the point. So no one is pushing this vaccine to kids. They cannot. They cannot.
I'm trying to just explain that, we're not, that's my point, that we're not trying to push it to the kids. We understand that the kids don't have much going on there. It's the adults that kind of matter. We're in that equation of keeping kids away. I feel like we're really trying to protect the adults more than we're actually trying to
Right.
That's what I wanted to just add in there, so people understand like where we come from with that when it comes to the kids. I think, Daniel, it's best now to see if anybody has questions. I know that there's one thing I wanted to get into that I saw. Uh,
Did we go through all of them?
we went through most. We went through most because if you look, a lot of them you already said. You kind of like said like right out of like just
Yeah.
That's why. So I was just maybe there's questions that people have just in case like if there's anything that you personally didn't answer.
Yeah, let's.
Because the last thing we spoke about was the short-term effects, long-term effects, right? And now we're up to talking about the immunity itself, and like, sorry, what's it called? The one question that I see here that I think that's very important is, in case people didn't know, but is the vaccine immunity going to be more effective? Is it set to be more effective than regular immunity that you would get from COVID?
So this is very interesting. So if you're not in the science field or immunology field and things like that, most people would think that if someone gets an infection, the immunity that they get from the infection is always better than the vaccine. Okay, so that's actually not entirely true. There are some infections that have that make immunity. There are some vaccines where the immunity that you get from them are better than the immunity that you get from the infection. So, for example, HPV, the vaccine gives significantly better immunity than the HPV infection itself. Okay, and in this particular case, in the Pfizer vaccine and maybe Moderna as well, there is a possibility, but we don't know yet. This is not something that's studied yet. We don't know yet, but it is possible that that the mRNA vaccine's immunity may be better than the natural immunity that you get from the infection itself. That's still unknown.
Yeah. And what about if someone was infected before? Are they still recommended to get the vaccine?
Sorry.
Someone
So yeah. That's a good question.
Like natural immunity
Yeah. So natural immunity is the immunity that you get from the infection, and so let's say you got COVID in March, right, when this all started. Can you get the infection again now, or a month later?
100%.
So the answer is it's possible. So there have been cases of reinfection. They have been rare, but they have happened. Okay, I have a patient in the hospital now who's been reinfected. I've had a patient one or twice in the past who's been reinfected. Now, having said that, majority of people, from what we know now, have not been reinfected. Okay, but seeing that there are cases of reinfection, it does give a little pause as to the kind of immunity that you're getting from the natural infection. Okay, so the FDA has recommended that people that's what the FDA and the CDC, they recommended that people who have had natural infection, they should get vaccinated, but only 14 days after you've been infected. So if you have an acute illness, let's say you have a cold or whatever, you should not get vaccinated. Okay. But those people, they recommend also getting the vaccine.
Now, next question I wanted to ask. So now let's say I got the vaccine, right? I got it today. Do I still have to wear masks? And also aside, do I have to wear masks? Do I have social distance? And let's say if I'm someone who's generally asymptomatic, is that going to help with since we basically what we've seen is a lot of spread based on asymptomatic patients, people that aren't experiencing much, people that aren't getting that no smell, no taste, whatever, that comes with COVID, all those other symptoms that are associated with it. So, what about that? Do we still have to do that? Do we still have to wear masks? Do we still have to social distance?
Mm-hmm. So there are several factors that, you need to look into and consider, okay? Number one, you look into the factor of getting the infection. Number two, getting severe disease from the infection. And number three, transmitting it. So those are the three things: getting the infection, getting severe disease, and transmitting it. We know that less people get infected and pretty much almost zero get severe disease when they get the 2 doses of the vaccine. Okay, we know that. Mm-hmm. But we don't know what happens about transmission, so that's still a question mark. Okay, and because we don't know the answer of transmission, if someone gets the vaccine, they get the infection, can they give it to their grandma? Because we don't know the answer to that question, the CDC still recommends that people still wear masks even if they got the vaccine. Okay. And, we'll see, we'll follow up with the CDC and the FDA in regards to what happens to the transmission rates and what their recommendations will be about masks. So stay tuned.
And then in the past, I personally, even going through Colombia myself, when I was in nursing school, we spoke about vaccination sometimes having ingredients, for when we had the whole measles outbreak in Brooklyn. A lot of people in my school, they mentioned the measles outbreak. They mentioned how, the Orthodox community had a really big outbreak. What they failed to mention was that the fact that the measles MMR vaccine is known to have pig in it as an ingredient.
Yeah.
So, of course, I sat there and I said, hey, did you realize that we as Jews don't eat pig? So if we don't eat it, you expect us to inject it? Like, this is what you have to understand from a very Orthodox community. So now that brings me to my next question. What about this vaccine? Is this vaccine what we call kosher, what we call halal? Is it, is there any type of pig or, gelatin or whatever?
So it's a very interesting question. So this came up yesterday. My religious cousin, he sent me an article from Indonesia where they have a lot of Muslims, and a lot of Indonesians were concerned, right? Because they keep halal. And it turns out that Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, and you saw the ingredients to the Pfizer vaccine. It's polyethylene glycol, the lipid layer, and some electrolytes in the RNA vaccine. So there's no pig or anything like that in that vaccine. And they also wrote in the article that's also in the references that Moderna and AstraZeneca don't have that. But also, if there is any substance, a vaccine that does have pig products, there was a big rabbi, I forgot the name, but
I know, but I didn't know what you're getting into, but I've heard about it. Like halakhically, we're supposed to do it. We're supposed to put our health first in those case scenarios where we don't, where we don't technically have a choice. And I believe they use gelatin or some type of supplement, and the same thing I think what you were talking about helps with the transport. So I guess
right. It keeps it stable. So sometimes some of the vaccines they use gelatin to keep it stable.
So let's say so. Danny, to my next question, right? I'm someone, let's say we're someone that can't get the vaccine, right? We can't get the vaccine, right? We don't want to get the vaccine, whatever it may be, right? Since there's a limit to quantity, or I don't want to do it, or whatever it is. What can I do now? What can I do right now to protect myself, to protect the people around me, to protect, like, my family, my friends, if it isn't taking the vaccine, what are the things that I can do? As a doctor, what have you seen has helped others when it comes to COVID? Not as far as medication, but more as like self-care, personal care, whether it's.
So great question. So before I answer that, I just want to clarify something that I said earlier, and because there seems to be some confusion. So the erectile dysfunction thing is seen with COVID-19. We have seen cases of that with COVID-19, not the vaccine. Okay, we have not seen cases of erectile dysfunction with the vaccine. Okay, that's been seen with the virus. So that's clarification. So to answer the question, so one thing that is brought up a lot is, okay, so what happens if I do get sick, right? Or my grandfather or grandmother gets sick? Well, what can we do? So number one, call their doctor, and talk to them. Okay, that's very important. And I'm not really giving medical advice here because I don't know anyone here in terms of medical history, but the risk factors that we know are obesity, kidney disease, and diabetes and high blood pressure, right? Those are all silent killers, okay? All those conditions affect the blood vessels in our bodies. And we have found that COVID-19 is not just a respiratory virus, it's a vascular blood vessel virus. It affects the blood vessels, okay? It's a blood vessel virus, and high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity can affect the blood vessels. So if you exercise, eat right, lose weight, etc., you help your cardiovascular health, and you basically allow your body to decrease the risk of having severe disease from this virus. Okay, so those are all important things that people should do. Masking, distancing, like those go without saying. I know that's been like all over everyone's throat.
That's like everything.
But I think the one thing that people don't talk enough about is eating healthy and exercising and doing that, and I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So that's number one, and that's number one, number two, and number three.
Yeah, yeah, health and
And
lifestyle is definitely important.
yeah,
You know, based on what you provided, the information that you
yeah,
stated, you know, comorbidities do play a huge role. Um,
right.
you know, and if there's anything, and we as Bukharians, we're pretty bad, you know, when it comes to diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, you know, so it's very, very
Yes.
important that we do put our, it's true. I'll say it exactly how it is. We are not the most health oriented people. We have a good percentage that maybe are very gym fanatic, workout heavy and all that nutrition. But many are, you know, we're very hesitant on the foods we eat are not top notch healthy, you know, a lot of oil. So always give a little peace of mind for your health, you know, because that's the most important. That's really, if there's anything that will protect us more than anything, it's that, you know, if you take good care of yourself, God willing, hopefully, you know,
So,
COVID doesn't play
so
a
somebody messaged me about
for it.
vitamin D. So there's some evidence that low levels of vitamin D are associated with severe disease in those who are hospitalized. So somebody, you know, asked the question, so should I take vitamin D if I get sick? I suggest you know, talk to your doctor about whether vitamin D is a good drug for you. I'll tell you from my own experience, from my family members, I suggested them to take the over-the-counter, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 unit dose for you know, maybe a week or two. But I wouldn't go crazy with like 10,000, 50,000, you know, IV drips. You know, I don't know about that. There's no evidence behind that. So there's no prospective, there's no data in a randomized trial looking at vitamin D versus no vitamin D in COVID-19. But we know that low levels are not good. So you know, it's indirect evidence. It's not great evidence. So that's why, you know, I don't give like a hard recommendation.
Just something I want to know if you agree with what I'm going to answer, but Rahel was asking about the huge difference in COVID effects, though. Like if you are healthy compared to not being healthy. From my general knowledge, if a patient's able to manage their blood pressure in a great way, you know, keep it in a great range, keep their A1C in a great range, that usually helps when it comes to getting a virus, getting infected, or getting sick. Am I correct about that? That if they're able to, because she was saying how you can't, you know, start having a good diet out of nowhere, after years of being unhealthy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you have those things maintained, you have those things controlled, your diabetes, sugar level, your weight, your blood pressure, you know, those things will play a role no matter what when it comes to it. And when you're actually sick, I believe your body will be able to fight better because you're not in those, you know, drastic ranges where you're not,
So
you know,
let me put it this way. Okay, this is I'll give you the scientific doctor answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is no randomized controlled trial that shows that if you exercise and do diet right now, that it will help you prevent from getting it or do better with COVID-19. But knowing the information that people who are obese, who are hypertensive, who are diabetic do worse with COVID-19 if they get it, it stands to reason. Okay, this is a hypothesis. This is not a proof statement. That if you exercise, if you control your blood pressure, control your diabetes, that's what the A1C he was referring to was, that you are more likely, potentially, you know, from a hypothesis standpoint, that if you get COVID-19, you may have better outcomes. But there's no proof to say that. But you know, it never, you know, it's always good to have a good healthy lifestyle, right? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The only thing is a lot of people think certain foods are considered quote unquote healthy, and some of those foods may not be healthy for certain people. So for example, I'm a kidney doctor. There are a lot of people who eat like bananas and orange juice and tomatoes, but if they have advanced kidney disease, those are not healthy for those people, for example. But for Eytan, it could be healthy. But for my kidney disease patient, it's not healthy. So
Yeah, sure.
when people talk about healthy foods, quote unquote, it has to be for a specific patient. So you have to, this is why I always say, like, talk to your doctor and ask them if those medications are right for you. So for example, if I tell you right now, yes, you should take vitamin D if you have COVID. The reason why I don't say that is because if you have hypercalcemia, if you have high calcium, and you now take vitamin D, you may make it worse, and then you may end up in the hospital because you know, if you have a history of high calcium, you may make it worse. So that's why I don't say that, because your doctor knows you better than I do. What is Michael's question?
Michael's question is, once again, is there a reason for a vaccinated person worried from a non-vax? So if you're vaccinated, should you worry about someone who's not vaccinated?
Yes, because we don't know about transmission of the disease yet.
Mm-hmm.
So you may get it and then give it to other people. And two, the other thing is, so this is a little tricky, right? So there's a 95% effectiveness against the virus, but there's that 5% where it's not effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, there's that tiny chance that you may still get the virus and get non-severe disease.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was that one person who got it in between the first and second dose. So you know, the answer is so what I would say is, until we reach herd immunity, I think we need to be careful and mask and social distance.
Yeah.
And until we get more data, we don't have enough data yet to really know the effectiveness. Because let's say you get the vaccine tomorrow, and then, you know, your cousin has a birthday party in March, and you go there, and then you're like, oh, someone has COVID, and then you're not protected, and maybe the efficacy of the vaccine in March is like 40%, right? Who knows? So maybe at that point you may be 60% risk of getting the infection. So, you know, you have to be very careful on, you know, how you do that. And then the other thing is, let's say you get the vaccine tomorrow, are you protected the next day? You're not, because the vaccine takes about 2 weeks to kick in, because your immune system takes about 1 to 2 weeks to kick into work. So you are unprotected when you get the vaccine for at least 2 weeks.
All right, guys. So just kind of.
Oh, one thing I want to mention, the other thing. So if there's anybody who has, how many people are still on? I know it's already getting late.
20-something, 30.
Okay, we got 24 people. So there's a clinical trial that is ongoing in my hospital, and I'm sure other hospitals are doing it too, for the monoclonal drug. So if anyone who's older, who's high risk, who has COVID-19, it's a drug called bamlanivimab. You can post that paragraph into the group. I know. I had to say that. I had to practice it a lot of times.
I love those drugs.
Yeah. So it's a drug that's used for people who have mild disease, you know, who are not in the hospital, who are at home, but they're like 80 years old, and you want to make sure they don't get severe disease. This is a drug that they can take to protect them, but you know, you have to talk to your doctor and talk to the people about that. Okay. So you know, you can post the information about the clinical trial and stuff like that to the group.
This is what we'll do. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I honestly have to run. But this is.
I think we're done.
Yeah, we're definitely that. We covered so much, and I kind of just don't want to overpower anybody, because we did get through a lot of information here. If anybody has any additional questions, you know, you guys know Daniel very well. He's part of the group. He's always around. Just shoot him a message, shoot him a text. You know, just don't bombard him. Don't be writing 100 messages like, you're lying. No, it's not true. You know what I mean? Because he really did take the time to give us this really bulk information. So if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to him. I am going to be posting this to MDB. So if you guys want to share it with any friends, anything like that, please let me know. I might share it on my personal profile. I'm going to ask Daniel about that too, just so we can get some of the older Bukharians to see it as well. You know, maybe share it with some family friends who would understand. Also, what else did I want to mention? Oh, if anybody has any questions about the antibody therapy that Daniel just mentioned, just reach out to him as well. You know, he'll let you know how to get set up with that. I hope I'm not missing. Thank you guys, everybody, who joined. Thank you so much, Daniel. I know you, like I said, guys, he dedicated a lot of time.
Yeah, so I want to thank my wife for putting up with me for doing this. So shout out to my wife.
Always gotta. Look how he like side glance her, like, see, I said your name. No, I'm kidding. But God bless you. No, thank you, man. We really, really appreciate it. You really did something nice for the. Yeah, I can confirm that statement. Why? It's great. You really did a big solid for us, for the group. You know, this, I feel like this gave us a lot more clarity and a lot more comfort with what's about to happen within the next few months than we, you know, first coming into it.
All right.
And yeah, guys.
And you know, listen, if you have questions, like Eytan said, feel free to message me on Facebook. I hope this clarifies some misconceptions and the misinformation that has been out there, and puts light to the things that are legitimate. So there are legitimate questions with every drug and vaccine and everything, and we should be questioning those things, okay?
Yeah, and also just keep in mind that this is not something new. I think, you know, drugs come out often, trials are done often. Like this whole discovering something that's changed the, you know, the way life is as we know it. It's been happening, you know. Yeah, maybe it happens more often with diseases that we personally don't experience and are not familiar with. But trust me, you know, there's constant new medical innovations happening all around us. And it's very important to just embrace it. You know, these are the things that are part of society. Look at just tech. Look at this phone. Look, we never thought we'd have so much power on a device, guys. All right, so that's kind of the reference I want to give you.
And I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go for it. I want to close it up. So whatever you have to say, like.
I was just gonna say, you know, given what the data that I've seen, I'm confident in the safety of it, and I'm fairly confident enough for the efficacy that I will take this vaccine once my time comes.
Yeah, maybe we'll post the video to the group. We'll think about it.
Yeah, that's sure.
So we'll see if we get it done. All right.
That's
all right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop recording.